So, over the next 15 minutes, we're going to talk about trauma, some childhood ACEs, and ways that we can help our kids reduce anxiety while inside of our classrooms. Because we want to make sure we create a safe and secure environment for all. Now, I would like to remind you that this training does not give you a trauma certification or a bias certification or anything like that. It is our one step just to remind you of some of those things. We do have those trainings available and we want you to go to them, especially trauma trainings. We all need to be trained in trauma at this time. So when you hear the word trauma, what does come to your mind? Natural disasters, sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, medical, that's injury, illness, or procedures, community violence, neglect, deprivation, traumatic grief, being a victim of a crime, a kidnapping, accidents, school violence, loss, or what about our latest one, COVID-19? Due to the experiences that some of us have had through them, that has caused trauma in our lives as well. So, what is trauma defined to be? Individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful. It could be threatening, and that can have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and physical and social emotional well-being as well. There are several different types of trauma. The first of which is acute. That's a result from a one-time event, such as the loss of a loved one. There's a chronic trauma. That's long-term, repeated events over and over again, like abuse, neglect, violence. And then there is complex trauma. That is the exposure to a variety of multiple traumatic events. These are often invasive and interpersonal in nature. These experiences will affect the way that a child performs in your classroom every single day. Our own lives will affect how we are ready to deal with every day as well. Think about this. You get up and you find out there's no breakfast. You spill your coffee on yourself. And you go to the car, you have a flat tire. All this stuff that's going on. Now you're late for work. Your administrator is frustrated because they're now covering your class. What emotions are you going through as you go to start this day? Now imagine, multiply that over time. This is real life for some of our students. And this is only one day for you. Today, we do not have enough time to go into all the detail about what you might see or hear your students are going through or have experienced before school or over the night every day. So I encourage you to make sure you look for our other trauma trainings and attend them. But let's take a look about some signs that our kids might show us if they are going through trauma. So preschool students may show fear of separation from their parent or their caregiver. They may do a lot of crying or screaming. They may be eating poorly. They may be losing weight. They may have nightmares. Our elementary kids, those guys, they may become anxious and fearful. They may be feeling guilty or shame. They may have a hard time concentrating in your classrooms. And they may be sleeping a lot because they have difficulty sleeping at night. Now the middle and high school guys, those kiddos, they start to be depressed or feel alone. They develop an eating disorder. They start self-harm, such as cutting. They may begin to use alcohol or drugs. Or they become sexually active very early. These are just some of the things that we see our kids go through regularly. So, quickly, let's talk about ACEs. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. They come in many forms. They come from physical and mental abuse to neglect and household dysfunction. Back in 1998, Kaiser Permanente published a groundbreaking study that investigated the impact of ACEs on the physical and mental health of over 17,000 adults. During the study, the adults were asked only 10 questions if they had experienced different types of ACEs prior to the age of 18. The study shows a direct correlation between ACEs and the future health complications. The constant toxic stress on a child leads to many health and behavior issues later in life, and mental problems as well. Especially with a score of 4 or more, we saw a very drastic measurement. If you would wish to take the ACEs quiz and kind of see what they asked and how you were, you can see the link below. We know we have stress in our classrooms, and some of it can become toxic. So what can we do to help reduce that stress? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we're providing that nurturing, safe, and stable environment for our kids, such as we can make sure we welcome each student at the door, call them by name. We can give them classroom jobs so they get that sense of belonging and they get to be a part of this class. We can do some relationship mapping on our campuses, and we can make sure that every child has at least one adult that they feel comfortable going to, and that adult knows something about them. We need to make sure we're doing our RTI behavior with fidelity, especially at that Tier 1 level. Those school-wide expectations that we've set and that your campus is enforcing, make sure you're a part of that and you're helping out by doing your part with it always. And don't forget about our circles, our morning meetings, or our good times. Those chances for kids to get to open up, to talk about what's going on and really relate with you and with others are very, very important. The next thing we can do is we can help our children learn to cope with adversity. This means building that growth mindset. Using our 7 habits. Look at growing leaders. Look at the human connection. And let's get out there and build those SEL skills. Resiliency. Emphasizing those strengths. Make sure you find something that a kid is good at. And anytime you've got to redirect, you make sure that you're giving them positives along with it. Remember, we need 5 positives for every 1 correction in our lives. And read alouds are great. This is where we go, we get a book, we read it to our kids. We, the teacher, sit down. It doesn't matter what grade they're in, whether they're in elementary school, whether they're in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I don't care if they're a senior in high school. People love to be read to. So we read to them and then take that time to go back and discuss the empathy and putting yourself in that character's place. And just getting those experiences and those read alouds are so important. And yes, it's the teacher that reads to the students. That's not going to go away. We need to be doing that on a more regular basis. And the one thing that we'll have very little control of, but we need to watch out for, is to reduce a child's ACE exposure as much as we possibly can. So, trauma in the brain. Let's talk about the brain for just a few minutes. You see, the brain comes out in a unique way. It is grown from the bottom up. So this right here is our childhood brain stem, and it is in full working order when we're born. It controls our heart rate, our breathing, our sleep, our hunger. Our brain stem is automatically working. But we're also working with a functioning threat detection system. That's right, our amygdala. It is there registered for that response of fight, flight, or freeze. And we develop many memories early on, and those memories are stored, and our body's reaction, our brain, how it deals with different situations, is based on our amygdala and how it reacts. Now, the interesting part is most of the prefrontal cortex, that is where actual thinking happens, and many of us, that is not developed until our mid to late 20s. So therefore, we're working from the amygdala. We're working from fight, flight, or freeze. And the most growth times we see, there's 2 times in our lives. The first one is from birth to 5 years. The second one is from 13 to about 17. So we are dealing with kids who were building their prefrontal cortex. So that means everything they're doing on is fight, flight, or freeze responses. That's why they're coming from us, from the direction they're coming from. They're just using their emotions to react with. So therefore, how do we need to respond to trauma? What do we need to do in the classroom? Well, first of all, communicate with those counselors. Those counselors has all kinds of great resources for us to use. Provide structure and consistency. That's that tier 1. Make sure we're doing it with fidelity. Make sure your classroom procedures are in place. Make sure we're treating everyone the same. Ease those transition times. Some of our kids, they need to know there's a change about to come. Hey, y'all, in about 5 minutes, we're going to be picking up and go to the next thing. Hey, y'all, in about 5 minutes, we're going to do da-da-da-da. Make sure you give them some prior notice. Provide them with choice when it's appropriate. Kids love to have choice. And if they get to choose how you get the information to them or how they turn into you showing they know it, that's always an awesome extra piece. We need to develop some strengths and interests too. So if you know that a child is working and they're really good at math, tell them how proud you are of them in the math. Help them develop that strength. Help them grow there. Be there for this kid. Now, this means you got to accept those kids where they are. And some of our kids, they're kind of rough. And sometimes it takes us a step back. But we need to meet that kid where they are so that we can help them grow. Leave them an out plan. Never, ever do we want to have them being disgraced. We need them to have a plan out. How can they get back in and save face? This is very important. And take care of yourself. Whenever we aren't taking care of ourselves, this is a very big challenge on how can we help children. So here in a second, you're going to take a short little quiz to see how well you've been doing. And then I'm going to come back with another video, and we're going to talk about some implicit biases. We're going to talk about how we can take care of ourselves, and we're going to talk about our threat assessment team.